Today we're going to talk about using context, taking it to unit rate, and then taking, once we have that unit rate, to tables and graphs. Sounds kind of crazy, but I think you'll figure it out. Hey, what does a cow carry in his wallet? Moolah. Moolah, it's another word for money. Cow jokes. Cow jokes. Cow jokes. All right, look at all those words. I will take a contextual situation, like a word problem or a scenario, that has a proportional relationship, and then I will find the unit rate, and then I will create tables or graphs of those values. And then I'll be able to make connections between those different types of representations. That's kind of our goal, okay? So, finding unit rate review. Do you remember this? We talked about this before. If you haven't watched it, go check out the unit rates video. All right, so finding unit rates review. So if I have a table and I know that I have 5 binders and it costs $10, okay? So a ratio can be converted to a unit rate by writing it as a fraction and then dividing the numerator and denominator by the value you want the 1 to be. So this is like the most confusing part, but once you figure it out, it's easy to rock and roll. So where do we want the 1 to be? Eventually there's going to be either a 1 here, whoops. Eventually there's going to be either a 1 in the number of binders here, or there's going to be a 1 here, okay? We want to figure out which one of those we want. So do we want to know, in other words, do we want to know the cost of 1 binder? So we figure out how much that cost is, or do we want to know how many binders I can buy with $1? Well, that doesn't make sense because it's going to be like a third of a binder or a half of a binder, right? So we're saying what we want is we want to know the number of binders. How much does 1 binder cost, okay? So in this situation, we want to know the cost of 1 binder. So we write down our fraction, okay? And since binders was on top, we go ahead and we're going to divide both of those by 5 because the number that we want to turn into 1 was associated with the 5. So we divide the top and bottom by 5, and we get, what's 5 divided by 5? That would be 1. And what's 10 divided by 5? That would be 2. Guess what you just found out? You just found out that 1 binder costs $2. And that, my friends, is our unit rate. So we put it in as unit rate. Once we have our unit rate, the rest of the table is pretty easy to fill out, okay? So in order for a proportional relationship to exist, so the 2 variables have a proportional relationship if the ratios of the variables are equivalent. In other words, the 2 fractions must be equivalent. Remember, 1/2, in order for it to be equivalent, the top and bottom have to be multiplied or divided by the same rate. And in this instance, we're going to multiply the top by 10, and we're going to multiply the bottom by 10, and we're going to get 10/20. And so this fraction right here, this ratio is proportional to this ratio because we multiplied and divided by the same number on the top and bottom, okay? Or we divide both of them by the same number, but we're not using addition or subtraction. It has to be multiplication or division, okay? Okay, so let's just review ratio tables real quick. So remember this one. Store sells bags of apples and 4 customers put how many bags and apples they bought into a table. So remember, this is just saying that one customer only had 1 bag and they had 4 apples. This customer had 2 bags. This customer had 3 bags. This customer had 5 bags. And that's the amount of apples that they had, okay? And so for in order it to be proportional, we can check 2 ways. We look at the bags and we say, how many apples are in each bag? Well, we multiplied by 4. What's the second one? We multiplied by 4. 2 times 4 is 8. 3 times 4 is 12. 5 times 4 is 20. So all of those have the same rate that we're multiplying by, so that works. The other way you can do it is look at it as equivalent fractions. And we could say, in these 2 ratios, we multiplied the first 2 by the same number. This one we multiplied. So now we're working at the first fraction and the third fraction, and we multiplied the top and bottom by 3, so that works. And finally, we're going to look at the first ratio and the last ratio, and we multiplied the top and bottom by 5. So in every one of these, the comparison between them, these we both multiplied by 5. These we multiplied by 3. These we multiplied by 2. And so we're trying to figure out, are we multiplying the tops and bottoms by the same number? And if we are, it's also proportional. Okay. So proportional graphs review. How do we know if a graph is proportional? Well, it has to start at 0, 0, and it must be a straight line. So let's see an example. Remember this example. It starts at origin, so it starts right there, and then it has to be a straight line. So that is proportional. Okay, Now we remember how to look at these different scenarios and find out if they're proportional. So now let's do one. Let's take something from the very beginning. Let's find its unit rate. Let's turn it into a table and then also a graph. Okay, so here's our contextual situation or a word problem. A store advertises a price of $25 for 5 DVDs. What would the cost to purchase 2 DVDs, or 3 DVDs, or 4 DVDs? Okay, well, first of all, let's find the unit rate. Trust me, every time you get a scenario like this, always find the unit rate. Because some of the examples I'm giving you, they're pretty easy to kind of figure out what you're going to multiply by, but sometimes you're going to get real tricky numbers. And when you have the unit rate, it makes life so much easier. So we're given a ratio of 5 DVDs to $25. And I went ahead and turned that into a ratio that looks like a fraction, okay? So what do we want to be per one? Do we want to know how much one DVD costs? In other words, we want to turn this into a 1? Or do we want to find out how many DVDs we can buy with $1? Well, you're not going to buy any DVDs with $1. They're more expensive than that. So it's probably going to make more sense to find out what one DVD costs. So that's what we're going to turn into 1. Since we want the cost per one DVD, let's divide both values by the DVD value. Since that's what we're turning into 1, that's what we're going to divide by. All right? Because we want to, why are we dividing? Because we want to get down to 1. We're getting smaller. So we're going to divide the top and bottom by that 5. So this will keep a proportional relationship because we're multiplying the bottom and top by the same number. What is 5 divided by 5? Well, that's 1. And what is 25 divided by 5? Well, that is 5. So what we just found out is one DVD costs $5. Okay, $5. So that's our unit rate. 1 over 5, or 1 to 5, or each DVD costs $5. Now that we have our unit rate, let's go ahead and turn that into a ratio table so we can answer the questions that we're trying to solve, okay? So let's answer the rest of the questions. So let's fill out what we know. So here's our table. What they gave us to begin with was 5 DVDs cost $25. And I put it over at the right side of the table because 5 DVDs was the biggest number we were working with, okay? And then I knew I was going to figure out 2, 3, and 4. And I knew that I also already found the unit rate because I divided the top and bottom by 5, and I got to my unit rate, okay? So now we have our unit rate. What do we need to know? We need to know how much does 2 DVDs cost, how much does 3 DVDs cost, and how much does 4 DVDs cost. So now that you know the unit rate, this becomes real easy, okay? Because I just look at the top and say, what did I multiply 1 by to get to 2? See, I multiplied by 2. So I have to multiply the bottom by 2. In this from here to here, okay? I multiply the top by 2, multiply the bottom by 2, and I get my answer to be 10. Well, now we know that 2 DVDs cost $10. Well, how much does 3 DVDs cost? Well, I multiplied the top by 3. Guess what? I'm going to multiply the bottom by 3, and that gets me 15. Well, you guessed it. What does 4 cost? I multiplied by 4 because I'm at 1. See how easy it is just to figure out what you multiplied by? And then I multiply the bottom by 4, and I get 20. And now I know the answers to my questions, all right? So how much does 2 DVDs cost? Well, $10. How much does 3 DVDs cost? $15. How much does 4 DVDs cost? 20 smackaroos, all right? Because we found the unit rate first, the rest of the table was easy to fill out. So now let's go ahead and turn all that data into a blank graph. Okay, so remember, here's our scenario. We know that what the unit rate was. Okay, and here's what data we figured out. So now we want to start making a blank graph and then title and label it if we want to turn this into a graph, okay? So let's make a proportional graph. Okay, here's our data. I just put that over on the side so we can use it here in a second. And here comes our table or our graph, okay? Now we have to title and label it. So the title and label. So first of all, I chose to count by 1s because our largest number was 25. I could have did by 5s, but our graph would have been like super narrow. So I did a pretty big graph and counted by 1s, okay? Our title is what? Cost in dollars per DVD. So how much is this per DVD? And since that's my title, okay, cost in dollars and DVD are going to be my 2 sides. So put DVDs on the bottom, and we're going to put the cost in dollars up the side. And now simply what we're going to do is take our data over here. 1 DVD costs $5. Okay, so where does that go? Well, we look at 1. So here's 1 DVD, and here's $5, and they meet up right there. All right, so instead of my chicken scratch, here it comes. That's one DVD, costs $5. Where would two DVDs go? Well, it would go at $10. So we go over to our 2, and we look at our 10, and where does that take us? Where do those two lines cross? Boom, right there. Where would 3 over 15 go? Go to 3, go up to 15. There's our data. Where would 4 go? 4 over 20, go to 4, over to 20. And finally, where would 5 go? All right, 5 over 25, so we're at 5, and we're at 25. And where do those lines cross? You guessed it, right there. Now that you have your data points, we just got to make sure this is proportional by drawing our line. And here it comes, boom. Does it start at the origin? Check. Is it a straight line? Check. So now you've taken a scenario, you found its unit rate, you took that unit rate to put it into a ratio table to answer the question, and then you took that question and said, I want to display it as a graph, as a proportional graph. And so now you have so many different ways you can display your data because you're geniuses, y'all. All right, so let's go ahead and fill out our blanks. All right, so number 1, it is always blank to turn any contextual situation involving ratios into the what? Well, it's always smart to turn any contextual situation involving ratios into the unit rate. Do it. Number 2, to fill in a ratio table, use the equivalent fractions and the unit rate to fill in the missing data. So remember, once you have the unit rate, you're just going to find equivalent fractions to that unit rate, and it'll make your table make sense. Okay, to use the data from the ratio table to plot your points on a graph. So you can, once you fill out your ratio table, use that data to fill out your graph. You know what? You guys are wicked smart. I mean, wicked smart. What kind of fish come out at night? That would be starfish. Stars at night.